My name is Adam Krishon, and I will be introducing tonight's guest speaker. Before I get into the introductions, I would like to acknowledge our business partners who helped make this event happen. The following partners have graciously contributed to the Voices of Experience series: Grant Thornton, First Bank, CO Bank, Rocky Mountain Human Resource People and Strategy. So a number of you are probably wondering who I am. I don't look like the dean, and I really don't probably look like a teacher or a professor. But actually, I am a recent graduate of the Executive MBA program here at Daniels. In addition to being a recent graduate, I am a veteran, a Marine, a Naval Academy graduate, a son, thanks. A son, a husband, a father, and an American. Thanks. In my opinion, DU and the Daniels College of Business have done an excellent job at embracing veterans, and I'm a perfect example of that. Just about 18 months ago, I was about a year and a half into my current role with Pepsi Cola, and someone told me, you can't do that position because you don't have an MBA. I didn't look very much further. I didn't have to, because once I read the description of the Executive MBA program, I knew it was for me, and it fit what I needed to do, and I can't begin to tell you what it's done for me, both professionally and personally, in my life. So it's been a great thing, and I just finished that about 4 weeks ago. I would also like to highlight the Daniels College of Business has partnered with a nonprofit organization, Veterans Transition Incorporated, to build world-class leadership programs for senior military leaders and provide them with access to exclusive networks so they can significantly accelerate their transition into high-powered roles within corporate America. So, you're probably wondering why there's such a heavy influence on the military tonight. After I introduce tonight's speaker, you'll have a better understanding. So, he told me to be brief, but I can't and I won't, because I worked for him, indirectly a long time ago. Not a long time ago, but pretty recently. But so General Krulak served 35 years in the United States Marine Corps. His last position was as the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the #1 position in the Marine Corps. And as a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he commanded a platoon and 2 rifle companies during 2 tours of duty in Vietnam and held a variety of command and staff positions throughout his career. These included the Deputy Director of the White House Military Office, Commanding General, Marine Corps, Combat Development Command, Commanding General 6th Marine Expeditionary Brigade during Desert Storm, Commanding General, Marine Forces Pacific. During his military service, General Krulak was awarded the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the Silver Star Medal, the Bronze Star Medal with Combat V and 2 Gold Stars, the Purple Heart with Gold Star, the Meritorious Service Medal, the French Legion of Honor Award, and many other decorations and medals. Upon his retirement from the Marine Corps, General Krulak joined MBNA Bank, America Bank, as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of MBNA Europe Bank. After 4 years in this position, he returned to the United States and served as Vice Chairman, MBNA America Bank, as Head of Corporate Development, Mergers and Acquisition. General Krulak retired from MBNA in June 2005. Currently, he sits on the Board of Directors, Freeport McMoran Copper and Gold, Union Pacific Railroad, and is director with Aston Villa Football Club, United Kingdom, and the Cleveland Browns. And he just told me he accepted the role as president of Birmingham South College in Alabama, which is very impressive. General Krulak is also a graduate of the United States Naval Academy and has a master's degree in labor relations from the George Washington University. That's the bio. But before I bring him up and introduce him to the podium, I want to tell a quick story that is near and dear to my heart, and I might get a little emotional because of what it meant to me. But I'm going to ask everybody in the auditorium here to please close their eyes and put their little mental memory or flashback childhood type stuff here. So close your eyes and I'm going to read a little story to you. So it's May 26, 1999, in Annapolis, Maryland. Imagine the most glorious spring day you have ever seen. Now I want you to picture yourself sitting in the stands of one of the most beautiful football stadiums you have ever seen. Quietly sitting on the field in front of you are 900 Naval Academy students wearing the Navy's dress white uniform, anxiously waiting to graduate to become commissioned officers. Oddly, you can't tell which graduates will be Marine officers and which ones will be naval officers because they all wear the same uniform at the time. To you, it looks like a sea of white because they are all wearing the same uniform. They are individuals sitting in perfect rows, patiently looking up at an empty podium. Slowly, the Chief of Naval Operations quietly walks up to the podium and asks all of the future naval officers to stand so he can read and administer the oath of office. 650 out of the 900 students on the field stand up and repeat that oath of office. Upon completion, they all took their seats and the stadium fell silent. Now, picture General Krulak, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, wearing his dress blue uniform, slowly walking up to the podium with an open notebook in hand. Interestingly, you notice that he closes the notebook upon reaching the podium. It is so quiet in the stadium, all you can hear is the wind blowing at your back, the birds chirping in the air, and the occasional baby crying in the background. You could cut the intensity of the moment with a knife, it was so thick. Calmly and in the most fraternal way, General Krulak states, "I want all of my Marines to stand up." You see all 250 Marines leap to their feet, and every Marine in the stadium lets out the most intense "oorah" one has ever heard in that stadium. General Krulak tells every Marine to raise their right hand, and from memory, he states the officer's oath of office. I, Adam Krishon, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. After the oath, the stadium erupts into an applause louder than any sporting event you have ever attended. If you haven't already, you can open your eyes now. So I played football at the Naval Academy for 4 years in that same exact stadium, and I'm telling you the truth, the applause that I heard that day was louder than any game I ever played there. After the ceremony, all of the Marines wearing our Navy whites at the time entered the locker room to put on our dress blues. I emerged a different man, proud man. General Krulak actually came in the locker room, shook all our hands one by one. My dad met me outside and gave me the biggest hug of my entire life. It was one of the most proud events I can ever remember. And he said, this is my dad saying now, there wasn't a dry eye in the stadium when General Krulak administered the oath of office. It was one of the most special events he has ever witnessed. Well, 12 years later, I finally get to thank General Krulak in person for creating that special event and solidifying my decision for becoming a United States Marine officer. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to introduce General Charles Krulak to tonight's event.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First off, it's great to be back in Denver. This is my parents' home. This used to be home to me. We lived, the last time I was here, we were on 99 South Downing Street in some apartments. So it's great to be here. It's also great to be at this school. I know that there are students scattered out in the audience. These are the men and women who are going to lead our country at least for the next 2 to 3 decades. The students that are here right now are going to participate in leading this country through the next 2 or 3 decades of the 21st century. So it's very special to have an opportunity to talk to them. And it's third special because it's the Daniel School. It's probably, if not the only one, certainly one of the only schools that teaches as a central part of business the role of ethics, the role of values. And if there's anything that's needed in business today, it's a sense of value, it's a sense of ethics. And so I'm very proud to be here to join in hopefully furthering that program just a bit. I'm going to talk about leadership, and in many ways you'll see we're talking about ethical leadership. And it's very difficult to talk about leadership to a group of people who are already recognized leaders in their own might. And it's always a tough task, and I will give it my best shot. It's going to be a little different, though, because I'm going to take you back in time. I'm going to take you through 3 vignettes that literally form the foundation of who I am and how I have acted throughout my life, both my personal life and my professional life. The vignettes took place in the early 1960s. There are a lot of people here who weren't even born in the early 1960s, but those of us who were can attest that the crust of the earth was not cooling then. Dinosaurs were not walking the earth. We actually had a civilization in 1966. The vignettes are going to take place during a stressful time of my life and one dear friend of mine's life. And the lessons I learned then, as I indicated, have been a foundation for who I am since that time. To get everybody in the mood, I'm not going to make you shut your eyes, but I am going to take you back in history. It's the spring of 1966. The 204th Bravo North Vietnamese Army Division, a division of some 30,000 North Vietnamese soldiers, was pulled south off of the border that separates China and North Vietnam, pulled through the country and poised along the demilitarized zone that separated South Vietnam and North Vietnam. This was a crack division. It had spearheaded the defeat of the French at Dien Bien Phu. They were made up of battle-hardened veterans led by great leaders, armed and equipped, trained and educated as well as any soldiers on earth. And here they were ready to lead the first direct invasion of South Vietnam by the North. U.S. intelligence had picked up the move as they started south through communications. They could hear that they were coming down and basically where they were going. So the United States and the Republic of South Vietnam responded by moving 11 infantry and artillery battalions of Marines up along the DMZ to blunt that attack. I was a young first lieutenant. I had just assumed command of a rifle company of about 160 men. Normally it's commanded by a captain. I was a first lieutenant. I was a little under 24 years old, so I was 23 years old going into combat for the first time, leading the company. The company commander had been killed about 2 weeks before, and I had inherited the company. My mission was very simple: to land in a small valley surrounded by jungle-covered mountains, about 1,500 kilometers max south of the DMZ. We were to set up on a hill, pointed north, dig ourselves in, and be ready for the attack. The valley really was nothing more than dried out rice paddies, about 9 football fields in length, 3 or 4 football fields in width, a stream bed going down the eastern side. Early one morning, probably around 6:30 in the morning, light just coming up, 12 helicopters landed that entire company at one time into that valley. And as they pulled out, we were taken under heavy small arms, automatic weapons, mortar and artillery fire. They had obviously waiting for us, and as we pulled out, we were in a terrible, terrible situation. I started to move the company off towards this stream bed to get them under some cover and some concealment, because we were obviously in a kill zone. One of the platoons, platoon of about 40 men, made up of 3 squads of 12 persons each, plus the platoon sergeant, platoon commander, and radio. So about 40 people had landed way to the west. And as they tried to get to this safety of the stream bed, the fire became so heavy that they dropped to their stomachs. One squad found itself directly in the line of fire of a North Vietnamese heavy machine gun. And within a matter of seconds, I had 3 Marines killed and 4 others wounded. And as I sat on the lip of this stream bed, the little cliff, I looked out there, and it was obvious to me that that gun was going to lay on that first squad and kill everybody in it. It was going to shift to the second squad and kill everybody there, into the third and kill everybody there. And I was going to lose probably 36 to 40 Marines in a matter of minutes. New commander, responsible and accountable for his people, and about ready to lose 40 of them like that. I get on the radio and I start moving one platoon down the stream bed to get into the flank of this gun. I had another platoon putting down a base of fire, firing at the gun in the tree line, trying to keep the enemy's head down. At the same time I was coordinating all that, rounds were still coming in, bullets flying, smoke everywhere, people screaming, and my radio operator grabbed me by the shirt sleeve. And he pointed out into the rice paddy and he said, "Look at Lance Corporal," and I'll call him Smith. Lance Corporal Smith. He had just turned 18 years old. He was an acting squad leader. Normally a squad leader is a sergeant. This was a Lance Corporal acting as a squad leader. He had jumped to his feet. He had taken his rifle. He had stuck it into his hip, and he ran right at that gun, firing as fast as he could. He got about 30 meters to the gun and cut to the right. The machine gun picked up off of the young troops out in the field and started tracking this Marine. The squad that was in such danger felt the pressure of the gun lift off. They grabbed their dead, they wounded, and they pulled them up into the safety of a rice paddy dike, ground. 2 other squads also saw what was happening, and they pulled up into a safe position. But this precious young Lance Corporal, he didn't look back. He didn't see it. So he just kept on fighting. And as I sat there, I could see the bullets getting close to him, and just when it looked like it was going to catch up, he'd cut the other way. It looked like a broken field runner in football. He'd cut the other way, and when he ran out of his ammunition, he'd drop his magazine, put another one in, still firing, back and forth, back and forth. Then all of a sudden, bam, picked up like a Raggedy Ann doll and thrown to the side. Obviously hit. Obviously hit. But in the time that he took to do what he did, that squad of his was safe. In fact, the entire platoon was safe. That platoon had gotten down on the flank of the weapon. The base of fire was still firing. I got a radio call from the platoon commander down at the flank, and he said, "I'm in position, I'm ready to go." And I said, "Okay," and I got the other platoon commander on the radio, and I said, "I'm going to pop a green star cluster." That's kind of a pyrotechnic, like a Roman candle. And when it goes up, I want the base of fire to shift so we don't hit our own people, but I want that platoon to come out of that stream bed, and I want you to assault across that tree line and take out every North Vietnamese you see. Everybody got it? They said, "Yes, I do." And I popped that green star cluster, and up it went. And as it went up, and these Marines jumped out of the stream bed, screaming and yelling and firing, my radio operator grabbed me again. This time he didn't say anything. He just pointed out into that rice paddy. And this young kid had gotten back up to his feet. And he put his rifle into his shoulder, the way he was taught at boot camp. And he got good sight alignment. And he got good sight picture. And he walked down the line of fire, that 50 caliber machine gun, just squeezing off the rounds as he walked. Walked down the line of fire of a machine gun. About 5 minutes later, I got up to where that now silenced gun was. And there were 9 dead North Vietnamese soldiers around it. And laying at the base of it was this precious young Marine. And his fellow Marines, like Marines do, went over there and they picked him up and they put him on a poncho because they were going to wrap him up in it. But they opened up his flak jacket and he had 5 bullet holes in him. And where they exited his body, I mean, they just tore out his back. So the only thing that was really holding him together was the tightness of that flak jacket. Unbelievable heroism. But that's not the point of this vignette. This was 1966. He was an African American. He was a black Marine. He couldn't, and he's from Deep South, he couldn't go to a drugstore, put $1 on the counter and get served. And yet there was something inside of him that when everything was crashing around him, when the people he was accountable for were getting chewed up, he got up and did something about it. And not only did he get up one time, he got up twice. And I'll tell you, for at least 6 months, I would rack my brain saying, what was it? What did he have? Because I want some of it. I want some of it. And what he had was selflessness. He was selfless. I mean, he cared for his people. At a young age, 18 years old, he understood what responsibility and accountability was all about. He cared for them. In today's world, in the world of business, the idea of being selfless, of not caring who gets the credit, but that the job gets done, to really care for your people, to mentor them, to educate them, to train them, to bring them along, to nurture them, to be there for them. You know, I remember in MB&A, we have these big call centers, and the idea that you could go in at midnight or on a Sunday morning just to be there, just to send a simple signal, we care about you. And that's what my people would do. You can pretend to care. You can't pretend to be there. If you had a quiver that held arrows of leadership, one of the first arrows in that quiver should be selflessness. You want to be a great leader? Be selfless. Be selfless. The second vignette took place 2 years later. I had been wounded that first tour and came back to the United States, and they had me at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot at San Diego, California, and I was training and educating our recruits. Notice that I said training and educating. Training is preparation for the expected. Education is preparation for the unexpected. We're in Vietnam, and it was full of the unexpected, just like we have in combat today. And so we were training and educating these young men to go to war, because that's where they were all going. One day, I went home in the evening, and my wife was standing at the door. And she had a brown envelope in her hand, and most of those who've been in the service here know what that is. It's coming from the headquarters. And sure enough, I opened it up, and it said, from the Commandant of the Marine Corps to Captain Charles C. Krulak. They had promoted me. Subject, permanent change of station orders. On such and such a date, proceed and report to the Commanding General, 3rd Marine Division, Republic of Vietnam, for duty with the 3rd Marine Division. I was going back to Vietnam. Obviously, my wife was not a happy camper. She did not ask me to go to Canada, which was probably a good thing, because it would have been a big decision to make. But a few weeks later, my wife, my young son, who was about a year old, and I drove up to Norton Air Force Base, which was the port of embarkation to catch a plane to go back to Vietnam. And I can remember it so clearly. I'm in the parking lot with her, and we're hugging. We're an emotional family, you'll find out. And we're hugging each other, and she's crying, and I'm crying, and my son, who was in between us, was crying, and I was thinking to myself, God, that's wonderful. Even he knows his dad is leaving, until I realized that one of my buttons was in his eye. And so, but anyhow, I said, you've got to go, honey, and put her in the car and put my son in the car, and they drove off. And I went into a hangar, which was probably 5 times the size of this building, just filled with soldiers and Marines all going to Vietnam. I got in there and I looked off to the right, and standing there all alone was this private first class Marine. And he had in his hand a little red workout bag that said, San Diego, the city in motion. Well, we were living in San Diego, so I went up to him and I said, how you doing there, Marine? And he goes, boom, comes to attention. He says, sir, the private first class is fine. So I said, hey, settle down, son, settle down. Just, what's your name? Sir. Private first class Cameron. I said, okay, Cameron, you just stand at ease, let's talk. And so within about a minute, I found out he was 17 years old. His parents had to sign the papers to allow him to go into the Marine Corps. He was turning 18 and therefore was allowed to go to Vietnam. He had never been north of Orange County, south of Tijuana, east of the Cuyamaca Mountains, or west of the Pacific Ocean. He'd been nowhere. He was an only child, and he was scared to death. He was scared to death. So I started trying to calm him down. I said, okay, well, now what's your job going to be? And he said, well, I'm trained to be a communicator, sir. And I said, a communicator? And he said, yes. I said, well, you've got it made. Communicators, they're in the rear with the gear. You'll be down in some bunker probably 20 feet underground. You're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And he says, is that right, sir? And I said, well, you don't think a Marine captain would lie, would you? And he goes, no, sir. About that time, they called us to the plane. We got on board the plane. It was a 17-hour flight. During that time, I would get up to use the restroom, and I'd look down the aisle, and there would be Cameron, and his eyes would be like that, and I'd go, don't forget the communicator, peace sign, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. We finally get to Vietnam. We get off the plane. Big old major sitting there saying, everybody that's going to work in the 1st Division, go into this group. Everybody's going up along the DMZ, which is 3rd Division's area, in this group. And I went over there. And who went with me? PFC Cameron. Well, let me tell you, by this time, I started to talk to him, and he basically was having none of it. He said, sir, I'm fine. Let's just get on with this. Let me just go up to the division headquarters. I said, well, that's a great attitude. I said, I'll tell you what. 13 months from the day, I will see you right here. Because the one thing that you could count on is that tour of duty was 13 months to the day. Not one day early, right? Not one day late, 13 months. So I said, I will meet you here. And he said, aye, sir. And so we got on the plane, flew up to Dong Ha. I got a helicopter and went out into the jungle and met my company. I get off the helicopter, and I met by the biggest first sergeant I've ever seen. This guy was he looked like Shaquille O'Neal. He's 6'7" or 6'8", probably weighed 290 pounds, not an ounce of body fat on him. He had fought as a PFC at Iwo Jima. He had fought at the Chosin Reservoir in Korea, and here he is in Vietnam, and he had 6 more months, and he was retiring. He took me off of that helicopter, and he introduced me to every single Marine in that company, every one of them. He knew their names. He knew where they were from. He knew whether they were married or not. He knew what sports teams they rooted for. He knew everything. You talk about knowing your people, he knew your people. And I said to myself, what a lesson, what a lesson. 3rd day I was there, I'm sitting at my desk writing a letter. Really, it was a desk, it was an ammo can. I was sitting on an ammo can, writing on an ammo box, and I see the first sergeant walking up. And behind him are 6 brand new guys, we call them BNGs, showing up to join the company. Who was at the front of the line? PFC Cameron. If looks could kill, I would not be here at the Daniel School. I mean, he just wanted to come over to that first sergeant and just let me get my hands around the captain's neck. He said one sentence to me. He said, "Sir, so this is in the rear with the gear." I said, "Lord, you're trying to tell me something." And I said, "Cameron, you're going to be my radio operator." And for the next 9 months, I mean, we had the most remarkable relationship. Although there's about 6 to 8 years difference between us, he became as much as a son as you'd ever have. I mean, we slept in the same foxhole, we ate the same food, we shared our own dreams and aspirations. I mean, it was just a phenomenal relationship. At the end of the 9th month, just like 2 or 3 times we always did, we had an operation. It was a very simple one. My company was to move up a finger, get up onto a ridge line, put ourselves in a defensive position, and the rest of the battalion was going to come down that ridge line, hopefully pushing the enemy into our position. It's called a hammer going up against an anvil. So we said that we can do this. This is simple. And we started up this finger, and we got about 300 meters up the finger and started taking sniper fire. And you could hear it going by, ping, ping, and you knew it wasn't close, because if it's close, there's a loud crack. But we started calling in some artillery just into where we thought the fire was coming from, and kept on going. Went another 200, 250 meters, when all of a sudden a loud crack right over my left shoulder. So I dove. I knew they were closing on me, and I dove to the ground, and as I turned around, here was PFC Cameron, and he had taken it right in the chest, and dropped immediately. I crawled over to him, and I opened up his flak jacket. And that bullet had hit the armored plating in the flak jacket, and it flattened out, so that went into him, it put a hole into him about the size of the end of a baseball bat. And I mean, he could hardly breathe. It's called a sucking chest wound. And he was trying to breathe, and he couldn't breathe, and it was terrible. And I pulled him up on my lap, and I took a pressure bandage out of my first aid pack, and I stuck it on his chest. And I held it there as tight as I could, and I just kept on saying, "Come on, son, you're gonna make it. You know, you're gonna make it, Cameron. Just hang in there, we're gonna get you out of here." And you could see he was going into shock. He started to turn gray. And I pulled him to my chest, just as tight as I could, holding that pressure bandage that way. And I mean, I was just saying, "Come on, son, you can hang in there, hang in there." And then all of a sudden, I was hit so hard on the side of my head that the kid flew off of my lap, and I was knocked sideways, and my helmet went flying off. And standing over me was this big first sergeant with a helmet in his hand, and he had obviously just hit me as hard as he could upside my head. And he looks down at me and he says, "Skipper, what the hell are you doing? Your entire company is fighting its way up that hill, and you're down here? What are you doing? Your responsibility is with them. You got a company in combat. We got corpsmen that can take care of Cameron. Get your butt up the hill." And I mean to tell you, I grabbed that helmet, I put it on, and I ran up that hill. And I caught up with that company, and we fought our way up to the top, and we got ourselves into defensive position, and I made sure everybody was where they were supposed to be. And I went back to the command post, and there was the first sergeant. He said, "Skipper, I'm sorry I hit you." And I said, "Top," that's First Sergeant, "Top, don't be sorry. You did the right thing. You know, I had obviously lost it down there. You're right, my job was up fighting the company. Forget about it. And he paused for me. He said, no, I can't. I apologize. I'm so sorry. I should have never hit you. And I said, First Sergeant, quit worrying about it. You saw that something was wrong and you did something about it. That was what was important. And he said, well, thank you, sir. And then he said he didn't make it. And I said, what do you mean? And this first sergeant with tears running, this big first sergeant with tears running down his cheeks said, Cameron, he didn't make it. He died on the way out. He died on the way out. Now, this vignette's got nothing to do with Captain Krulak, although there's a lot I did wrong that everybody in this room ought to be able to think about and put it to their own lives in certain areas about responsibility, authority, and accountability. And it wasn't about this precious young PFC who, like a lot of kids throughout our history, have given their lives in service to their country. Had everything to do with the first sergeant. As I indicated, this man was 6 months away from retirement. Is there anyone in this room who thinks that it's legal for an enlisted man in the Marine Corps to hit an officer in the Marine Corps? I mean, that's called assault and battery. And that's a court-martial offense. I mean, that's 15 years at Fort Leavenworth Prison. In a matter of seconds, he sees something that is not right. And he has the moral courage, with all the things at stake around him, to take action. Now, we can argue all day long about what action he took. I mean, the fact that my head still rings every once in a while, I wish he had chosen a better way to get my attention, although I doubt it would have worked. But the point is, he saw something that was wrong. He saw some loss of situational awareness, and he took action. And he took action without regard to his own personal well-being. He had moral courage. And let me tell you how important that is in the world of business today. There's not a leader of any company or any portion of a company that I know that comes to work in the morning and says, can't wait to screw it up today. Can't wait to blow it. Can't wait to lose the company money. They want to do well. They want to do well. They want to do well for a lot of reasons, but suffice it to say they want to do well. They don't always have the right course. They may be off 10 degrees, and you're sitting there and you see it. Too often, people just let it go, and you read about it all the time. When in reality, if we had enough people with moral courage to tell the boss, to tell the emperor or empress that they aren't wearing any clothes, we'd be so much better off. I will tell you that both in the Marine Corps, but more importantly, when I was chairman and CEO of a bank, I tried desperately to surround myself with people of moral courage, because I knew that they would stand up and tell me when I was doing something wrong. And that is so critical. The more senior you get, the more important it is that you surround yourself with people who have moral courage. So if there was another arrow to stick in the quiver, put that one in there. The third vignette had nothing to do with me, but had something to do with my very dearest friend, a captain then by the name of Thomas Valentine Droughty. Captain Droughty and his battalion were operating to the west of Da Nang, which was about, several hundred kilometers south of the DMZ. His battalion was operating in a fairly large area that stretched probably 30 miles across. And One day, he was called to his battalion headquarters by his battalion commander who said, look, we're going to do an operation at the far end of our area. And we're going to do it with the South Vietnamese Marines. And so I want you to take your company and I want you to move out today, because there's a village, and there was a village right in the center of this area of operations that constantly provided sniper fire. Anytime anyone got near it, people were shooting at them. And so the battalion commander said, I want you to go clear that village. Next morning when we come through, we'll come through around 10 o'clock in the morning, you just come in as Taylor and Charlie and we'll just keep on going. But we won't have to slow the battalion down because of the sniper fire. So Captain Droughty said, got it, sir, very simple operation. He mounts his people up, and they get to this village around 5 o'clock in the evening, and he's taking no fire. He gets his men on a line in a road. It's really kind of a sunken road, as a matter of fact, and they get themselves in line, and they get up and they start moving across the rice paddy. There's a rice paddy, then a tree line, and then the village. And they're moving across the rice paddies, and they started taking a lot of small arms fire. Almost sounded like a vacuum cleaner. He said, sounded like a vacuum cleaner, just whoosh. And he started taking some casualties, so he said, okay, let's pull back to the sunken road. He gets his wounded back to the sunken road, puts his company in line again, gets on the phone and calls in some air and artillery on the tree line where the fire was coming from. And they plaster that tree line for about 30 minutes. He gets his people back up, and they start moving across the rice paddy again, start taking a little bit of fire, but they get themselves into the village. They get in the village, and it really gets into a heck of a firefight. And he keeps on looking around, and there's just lots and lots of North Vietnamese soldiers. And he realizes, there's a lot more of them than there are of us. And he calls the battalion commander. He says, look, we're really in a fight here. And the battalion commander said, okay, look, pull off. There's a hill mass to your east by about 100 meters. Get up on top of that, set in a defensive position. We'll move to you starting right now. As an aside, intelligence indicated later that he was up against a regiment, so 150 Marines against 1,500 North Vietnamese. Marines are good, but not that good. I mean, that's a heck of the odds aren't good. So he gets his people up, he gets his dead and wounded, and he takes them up on this hill mass, and he sets them in defensive position, and he starts counting noses, finding out make sure we got everybody, redistributing the ammunition, making sure people have water, making sure they have food. And they go through all of this, and finally one squad leader comes up and says, sir, I'm missing a man. And Captain Droughty said, well, where is it? And he said, well, I saw him, he got shot. I know where it was, but I thought he was with us, but he isn't. He must still be down there. One of the things that makes Marine Corps different is that we never leave our dead and wounded on the battlefield, ever, ever. And so Captain Droughty said, well, do you know where he is? And the squad leader said, yes, I do. And so Droughty said, okay, let's go down and get him. And so they went down to the village. By then, the North Vietnamese had cleared out. They went right to the hut, and sure enough, this Marine was dead. And so Captain Droughty picked him up and put him on his shoulders and carried him back up to the top of the hill and laid him down. A few hours later, the sun was just coming up, and the battalion had been moving all night, got to where their position was. So Captain Droughty goes down off of the hill, and he meets the battalion commander halfway up. And the battalion commander looks at him and says, oh my gosh, are you hit? And Tom looks at himself, and he's got blood all over him. And he said, oh no, sir, this is me. And he told him the story, and this is the young Marine's blood on me. And the battalion commander said, well, let me see if I get this right. Are you telling me that you and one other Marine went down into that village and for a dead Marine? And you're the company commander, you go down there to get a dead Marine and you carry him back up here? Is that what you're telling me? And Captain Droughty said, yes, sir, that's what happened. And he said, well, let me tell you something, Captain. You ever do anything like that, anything so stupid like that in your life, one more time. You're finished. I will relieve you of your command. Do you understand that? And General Droughty came to attention. Aye, sir. I understand and I will obey. That's what it means. And then he takes 1, 2, 3 steps, stopped, turned back to the battalion commander and said, sir, I've got to be honest with you. If it happened again tonight, I'd go down and get that Marine. In which case, the battalion commander said, you're relieved of your duties. You're relieved of your command. Turn it over to your executive officer. So Captain Droughty's walking down to turn the command over to his XO, and he hears a helicopter. And he looks off to his left, and here comes a helicopter landing. And on the side of the helicopter was a scarlet flag with a gold star on the side of it. It was the helicopter of the Assistant Division Commander of the 1st Marine Division, of which his battalion was a part of. So the Assistant Division Commander of the 1st Division is landing. The battalion commander sees this, and he starts walking too. And so here's Tom Droughty standing there. He's got the ADC coming at one angle and the battalion commander that just fired him coming at the other. And he says, oh, I'm in deep trouble here. The general comes up and he says, who is the CEO of Mike Company? That was the company that Tom commanded. Tom told me later, he said, I wanted to point over at the XO and say, hey, there he is, go get him. He said, sir, I'm the CEO of my company. At which point the general said, well, let me tell you something. I listened to your fight all last evening. And I want to tell you what a remarkable job you and your Marines did and how proud I am. The battalion commander standing there hearing all this. And the general turns to the battalion commander and he says, you know, Colonel, with Marines like Captain Droughty here as your company commanders, you probably have one of the best battalions in the entire division. And Tom's sitting there, at which point he feels this arm snake around his shoulder and he says, yeah, isn't he great? Isn't he great? If you asked me that battalion commander's name today, I couldn't tell it to you. He lasted for another 6 months and then retired from the Marine Corps as a lieutenant colonel. Many in this room know Captain Droughty. You may not know him by name, but you've seen him because during Desert Storm, he was the assistant division commander of the 1st Marine Division, Brigadier General Tom Droughty, who led the division into Kuwait City when it was captured. The same position of that general who stopped him so many years ago. Tom Droughty always wanted to be a Marine. He's from Kankakee, Illinois. He goes to town with his mother one day and he sees a Marine recruiter in dress blues. And from that moment on, he says, that's what I want to be. He goes to the Naval Academy. He has 3 tours in Vietnam, wounded twice, married a Marine. If you cut his wrists, he'd bleed scarlet and gold. Loved the Marines. That's all he wanted to do in life, be a Marine. Willing to give it up in 3 steps. Willing to give it up in 3 steps. You get relieved in combat, any of these Marines will tell you, you're finished. You're finished. He was willing to give it up in 3 steps rather than lose his integrity. Rather than lose his integrity. Integrity is the only thing we really own. My second cousin, he says, hey, I've got a nice car out there. I got a nice apartment. We all have cars and apartments and houses, and we own rings, and we own this and we own that. We don't own them. Somebody can steal your car, your house will burn down. You only own one thing, and that's your integrity. Nobody can take it from you. Only you can give it away. And I'm going to tell you something, when you give it away, it's awful hard to get it back. It's awful hard to get it back. In business, your word's your bond. You say something, people around you can take it to the bank. If you say something and you find out later You're wrong. You go back and you make sure that everybody knows that you're wrong, and this is the right way. This is the right word. Integrity. I mean, think of what that would mean if everybody who's in business today or everybody in life today understood the importance of that arrow in the quiver, integrity. I'm often asked, okay, what is the most important leadership trait? What is it that is going to, quote, guarantee success? Not just in business, but in life, in your family, in your relationships. What is it that's going to bring you victories? And my answer that began so many years ago in that rice paddy was simply to be a man or a woman of character. Be a man or a woman of character. And it should be fairly obvious. I define character as having an abundance of selflessness, great moral courage, and tremendous integrity. Selflessness, moral courage, and integrity. I look out, particularly to the young people in the audience, and I see these really talented, smart, articulate, visionary, great young men and women. Those are all gifts. Every one of those traits is a gift. If you're a religious person, you got that gift from God. If you don't believe in God, it's hereditary. It's what your parents gave you. However you want to think about it, it's a gift. You didn't make yourself smart. Daniels didn't make you smart. You had the innate intelligence. It just helped focus it. Character is a choice. You choose to be a man or woman of character. You choose. And you build that character by making tough decisions throughout your life. And when I say tough decisions, I'm not talking about, do I have Pop-Tarts for breakfast? I'm talking about the ones that many of the more senior people in the audience know what I'm talking about. Your palms begin to sweat and your stomach is churning. This is one of those down and dirty decisions I've got to make. You make enough of those. You make enough of them right. You make enough right decisions. You build this reservoir that when the toughest times come, you can dig deep into that reservoir and pull up the character you need to make the decisions that need to be made. And you will be victorious. You will have victories. Now there's some in the audience who will say, well, I was with the general up until that point. But by golly, I've seen a lot of people who had zero character make it all the way up. They get the promotions. They do this. They have no character. They're not selfless. They have little or no moral courage, and they certainly don't have integrity. And look at, they're getting victories. And my answer to that is very simple. The victories are never sweet. Their victories never stand the test of time. And their victories never, ever inspire anyone. And at the end of the day, as a leader, whether you're a business leader, the leader of a family, a leader in the military, at the end of the day, you're in the inspiration business. That's what you do. You inspire ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And if you think about the people who inspired you in your life, think about them. I mean, what set them apart? It's your parents or your grandparents or some teacher or a coach, a Girl Scout leader or Boy Scout leader. What set them apart? And if you think about it, the answer is going to be simple. It was their character. It was their character. You want to be successful in life. You want to be successful in business. You want to be successful with your family, you want to be successful in your relationships, be a man or woman of character. Concentrate on your selflessness. Don't be afraid to take a stand. Do the right thing for the right reasons. And maintain your integrity. You do that, you're going to be a great success. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Are you okay with questions?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll take any questions you want, and it doesn't have to be on what I talked about. If you have anything that's on your mind that you'd like to, yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that when you were at MBNA, you worked to surround yourself with people of moral.
Yes. Yeah, I will.
How did you ascertain that?
Okay, that's a good question. The question was, when I was with the bank, I indicated that I surrounded myself with people with moral courage. How did I find those people? What were the indicators? It was a very you can imagine, it was a very interesting time for me. I had retired from the Marine Corps and had decided I wasn't going to go into what the service chiefs normally get associated with a defense industry. I mean, they're dying to get you and they're willing to throw a lot of money at you. I wanted to do something totally different. I'd always been interested in finance, so I had a friend and he hired me, and then before long I found myself in Europe running a bank. And so the first thing I did was I got all the leadership of the bank together in one room, and I said, listen, and I shared this earlier tonight, listen, you all have forgotten more about the banking business than I know. Let me repeat that for you. You all have forgotten more than I know. So I'm going to need your help. And the first thing I'm going to need you to do is be honest with me, and every time you see me doing something wrong, let me know. Let me know. And then, with that as their charge, I waited for about 3 months, knowing that I didn't know squat, and I was going to foul it up. Who's going to stand up and say, you're fouling it up? And I would say that out of the 10 immediate leaders, 7 stood up. 7 of them, and the other 3, interestingly enough, didn't last. They were eventually left the company. I guess I've been blessed to be able to figure out when people are blowing smoke and when they aren't. And I just weeded them out. I mean, like I said, the more senior I got in whether it's the service or in business, the more I could surround myself with people who weren't yes men, that weren't sycophants. There's enough people who are willing to tell you how great you are, and if you know you aren't that great, then it's pretty easy to identify who's blowing smoke and who isn't. Yes, sir.
I want to ask you, why did you pick your stories from your early part in your life?
Okay, that's a good question. Why did I pick stories from the early part of my life rather than the later part? Because they were the foundation that built all of my views on leadership. I had some very interesting stories. I mean, as a member of the Joint Chiefs serving for President Clinton, I can tell you a lot of stories there where I mean, there were very difficult times, very difficult for all the service chiefs. There were difficult times when I got to England in the banking. There were difficult times, but none of them were of earth-shattering nature that said, boy, I've just learned something new. What it did was reinforce what I had to be the type of person I felt was needed to be a success. And that was this idea of selflessness, moral courage, and integrity. I could have used those other ones. I decided not to.
I also want to thank you, you and the U.S. military, because I'm originally from Kosovo, but the reason I'm alive, and I know it sounds like one of those superficial stories, but
Oh, thank you.
Not an overstatement. If you know about the 99 conflict, you know, I came here as a refugee, so
Yeah, that was my,
indebted to the U.S.
well, thank you. That was my last big issue was Bosnia and Kosovo and all that was going on there, which was the interesting point there with the president. For what it's worth, we were in the cabinet room, and it was all the service chiefs, the president, and the secretary of defense, and they were talking about putting boots on the ground. Boots on the ground. I mean, forget about the air. They were going to want to do an invasion. And so they were big discussion, and three of the service chiefs were all saying, yes, we can do it, no problem, no problem. And they get around to me and they said, well, what do you think, General Krulak? And I said, well, let me just ask a couple of questions. We have M1A1 tanks. That's what we're going to take in, right? And they all said yes. And I said, well, have you looked at the tunnels going into the country? Have you looked at the ability of the bridges to take that kind of a tank? There wasn't a tunnel going through the mountains that tank could fit through. And there wasn't a bridge that could hold them. And there was just this audible gasp. President Clinton stood back for a little bit. Secretary of Defense got on the phone, talked to some people back at the Pentagon, said, hey, is this little guy right? I mean, are you telling me we don't? And the answer was yes. The bridges can't hold, and the tunnels, we can't get the tanks through. But, you know, we got other tanks. The other tank is one that we 12 years ago. And at that point, President Clinton said, we're not going to put people on the ground. It was something as simple as that. I didn't even think I was just saying, hey, did anybody check the weight of, scary, isn't it? You don't want to hear this, do you? Yes, sir.
In light of the fact that we were originally just going into Libya to do a no-fly zone, and it appears that we're doing more than that, what are your thoughts on our intervention in Libya?
Yeah, well, I'll answer that very bluntly. I think it's a big mistake. A big mistake. I think the no-fly zone, to take down, it's called integrated air defense, IAD. To take down an integrated air defense requires a lot more than just jamming and knocking out radars. Sooner or later, you got to do something on the ground. So that's frightening. Second thing that's frightening is if you were just imposing a no-fly zone, that would be one thing, but you're not doing that. You're taking out tanks, you're taking out artillery, etc. Three, I don't know where the national interest is. You should not commit U.S. forces in anything that is not in our vital national interest. And I've yet, thank you. And I have yet to see where our vital national interests are articulated. I mean, how can we think that that country is of vital national interest in kind of dismiss what's happening in Syria or what may happen in Saudi Arabia? I mean, we have a lot more interest in Saudi Arabia than in Libya. So I'm very much against it. I was very disappointed. Yes, sir.
You know a lot about war and how much it costs, and you know a lot about money. Does this nation, in your opinion, have the discipline?
Starting over here. Thank you.
You know a lot about war and a lot about money. Does this, and I'll ask you one question you don't have to answer.
Sure, I'll answer anything.
Does this nation have the discipline to stop spending more than we really have? And do you own any gold?
First off, if you knew how much Marines make for retirement, I own a little gold, but not much. I think the fact of the matter is, we're involved in two conflicts that are basically 10 years old. Anybody who's read any history will know that you're never going to solve Afghanistan, not in a million years. We're not going to solve that. It's a country that is, I've been there multiple times. I mean, it's desolate. It's tribal. They're in forget about the 18th century, 15th, 11th. I mean, it's just very tough nut. If you were going to look at Afghanistan, you, in my opinion, have to look at our relationship with Pakistan and with India. But we, in our infinite wisdom, have basically decided that they aren't inextricably linked, that you can look at one and dismiss what's happening in the other two. Both of the other two far more of importance to us than Afghanistan. The Al-Qaeda is like a child's game of whack-a-mole. Okay, have you ever played whack-a-mole? You hit it here and it pops up there. That's Al-Qaeda. It is not a geographic entity. It is it's in many ways an idea. And long ago, I learned that you do not defeat an idea with bullets. You defeat it with a better idea. We need to have a better idea, and we don't have it now. And so the intervention in Afghanistan and what we're doing is just costing the country not only the money. I mean, the money's bad, but think of the youth that we're losing. I mean, great young men and women that are dying over there. And I'm not a pacifist. Heck, I spent my life fighting. I just want to go where I know it's in our country's vital interest, and I want to have a strategy. I mean, there are 3 levels of conflict. There's a strategic level, operational level, and tactical level. You talk to the young Marines, and we're winning at the tactical level, and we are. Every time we get in a fight, we win. But there has never been a war won at the tactical level. It's won at the strategic and operational level. And we are losing at the strategic level. No one can tell you that we're winning. And if they do, they're just not telling you the truth.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I was wondering, a lot of your examples of character building, they had to do with war.
Yes.
And I'd love for you to share some of the experiences or things that have defined people that have served under you that have been good leaders that might be different than what you've experienced. Because I don't think a lot of people in my generation can relate to that.
Well, I want you to relate to it. I desperately want you to relate to it, because it didn't matter whether it happened in Vietnam, it didn't matter, battlefield or boardroom, the same concepts exist. I mean, I had a chief marketing officer in MBNA Europe, a guy by the name of Joe DiPaolo. He's now the vice president of Sallie Mae. He got word from our parent company, the Corp in the US, that we were going to run a new credit card. And this credit card was going to be a 9.8% APR. That was it. It was going to revolutionize, quote, credit cards, because one card, one rate, that's it. We're as transparent as you're ever going to get. The trouble is, in the United Kingdom, nobody borrowed money at 9.8%. It was all, 0%, 1.5, maybe max 6.9. So, he's saying, sir, this is crazy. This is crazy. And I said, well, this is kind of what they want. He said, well, look it, we gotta do something about it. I said, okay, Joe, do something about it. See how you do. Joe DiPaolo picks up the phone, calls up the chief marketing officer for the company, gets him on the phone, lays out exactly why this is not a good idea. The next thing I know, I get a phone call, a conference call with the CEO and chairman of the company, with Joe DiPaolo as the mouthpiece, and he gets up there and lays this out for the corporate headquarters, and within, literally, it took about a day, he had changed the entire policy. There's an example of somebody who saw me possibly going down the wrong path, didn't know enough, stopped me, when told, okay, Joe, if you really believe in that, do something about it, ends up having the chairman and CEO of the corporation on the line in a conference call with him, Joe, doing all the talking, and at the end of that conference call saying, okay, Joe, go with what you think is needed. Yes, sir.
I think the
audience would like to hear something about your father and his background with the Marine Corps. Now, the question was about my dad and his background. My dad was obviously a Denver resident and a Cheyenne resident. His nickname was the Brute. Well-deserved, believe me. He fought in World War II. He was a paramarine, a raider. He fought in Korea, and then he commanded all the Marine forces in Vietnam. He developed the concept of vertical envelopment, which is the use of the helicopter as something other than a medical evacuation bird. He was the father of the LCVP, the landing craft that you see coming in and dropping the bow ramp at Normandy. That was him. He had an 800-pound brain. He was a brilliant man. He died at the age of 96, and just a couple years ago. Just a great man. Loved Denver, loved Cheyenne. Tell you a story. This is out of the book, but you'll get a kick out of it. Get a phone call from the author. This is going to embarrass some of the people in the front room here, but I get a phone call from the author, and he says, look, and my dad was still alive when this book was being written. He was 95 at the time. He said, look, I got to talk to your father about that first marriage he had. And I said, what? What are you talking about? He says, your dad's first marriage. I said, he was only married once. He was only married to my mom. He said, no, he was married before. I said, there's no way my dad was married. He was married to my mother she died at 93. And he said, look, I got the marriage certificate in front of me. Your dad was married. I said, oh my gosh, fax me the marriage certificate. While he's faxing, I called my two brothers. I said, did you know Dad was married before? He said, no. Okay, he's 16 years old, up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, falls in love with a 15-year-old. They catch, I guess, a train down to Denver, claim they're 19 and 18, and get married. Have a honeymoon in Denver. Show back up in Cheyenne married 4 days later. On the 5th day, the marriage was annulled. And so I'm thinking to myself, and I share with my second cousin, I'm sitting there saying, let me just see what my mother said when my dad entered the pearly gates. I mean, can you imagine? Brute. Anyhow, a great man, very, very interesting guy. Yes, sir.
What do you think about compulsory service for the upcoming people, those of us who were fortunate enough to serve out there?
The question there had to do with what do I think of compulsory service or the draft? First off, I think that service to our country is something very important. I do. I believe that with my heart and soul. I don't think that it has to necessarily be in the military. I would like to see some kind of service where you spend a year or 2 years doing something good for our nation, because the nation has been so good to us. The trouble with the draft, reenacting the draft, is that the world has changed so much. The warfare has changed so much. The systems have changed so much. It's so high tech that the idea that you can get somebody in and hold them for 2 years and expect them to go out and be able to fight the type of war that we're asking kids to fight today, you're just not going to have time to do it. That's why, again, just a little bit of what's happening in our country today, that's why when you hear people say, we're going to train the Afghanis to defend themselves, understand that, in these young Marines know this, understand that to make a Marine corporal takes about 4 years. To make a captain takes about 5 years. To make a battalion commander takes about 18 to 20 years. And we're going to take people who are basically 80% of them are illiterate. They can't read, they can't write. And we're going to train them in 2 years to be an effective armed force, an effective police force. They can't even read the manuals. So when you hear that, have your antenna go up because somebody's smoking a funny weed. Yes, sir.
Josh Kia, West Point, class of 2001.
Hey, Josh.
Since you transitioned out of the military,
Yes.
And you've been in organizations that don't have the value-based and server-based leadership models, have you met resistance trying to instill those in the organizations you've been in?
No. I've had, as a matter of fact, they've eagerly embraced it. And in well, we have some people from Union Pacific here. Raise your hands, Union Pacific. Let me tell you, I'm on their board. It's like going to the Marine Corps. I mean, they are that focused on values. I think it's universal. Lots of companies really want desperately to develop servant leaders. They're just not really sure how to do it. And so I teach at Union Pacific, at Freeport McMoran. But I've never had anybody come up to me and say, hey, tone it down a bit. Yes, sir.
Well, all right. Real quick, you alluded to, and first off, I think your father was married 3 times. Third was the Corps.
Yeah, you're right there.
But you alluded to being a leader, captain, but also being led by your first sergeant.
Yes.
Drawing a parallel to the officer ranks being kind of management,
Yeah.
first sergeant as kind of the staff or the production folks. Being led, but also leading. Can you speak to how you encourage that?
Yeah, and again, that was never much of a problem, and I don't think it's really, in the businesses I've been around and with, I haven't seen it much of a problem. As long as the leader, the man in management, articulates to the people under him that hey, I want to know if you see something going wrong. It's the moral courage aspect, but at the same time, that you flip it around and you empower them. I use the term unleash. People say I'm going to empower. I think that most of the people I've worked with that have been under me are like a dog on a leash, just pulling, let me go, I can do this, I can do this. Let the leash go. Unleash them. Will they screw it up sometime? Absolutely. Absolutely. You let them go. They'll learn, you bring them back, you mentor them, you counsel them, and then you let them go again. And by the end of the day, you're going to have a much better company. You're going to have a much better unit of whatever you're doing, whatever you're involved with. Again, unleash your people, unleash them. Their potential is unbelievable. Or you give me the hook. Here we go. Uh-oh.
So if I could add one last comment, and it really hit home when I was sitting in this chair listening to your final words. But so if I looked at this thing as an org chart, and as the Commandant, you're looking down. You're not even on a box. You're just looking down, right? And I'm this D, right? But the true mark of a leader and what you do, and it hit home to me, especially 12 years ago in that locker room, through selflessness, through moral courage, through integrity, you're able to lower yourself to that common denominator with that individual, no matter what their status is. And that applies in military and non-military. And you have that uncanny ability, of which I see in all great leaders. And I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Uh-oh. Wow, look at that.
On behalf of the Voices of Experience speaker series, this is our gift to you.
Can I open it up?
Sure.
What do you think?
Okay.
No, I won't.
Okay, we'll open it later.
Ooh, very expensive. It looks like a pair of, what is that?
So
I got to open it up. Everybody wants to see it. It's a blanket. Hey, I love it. What every Marine general needs. Thank you so much. I'm teasing you. Thank you so much. Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I believe that concludes the speaker event for tonight, but we're going to have an open reception here, so please join us and stick around. Thank you.